The heart wants what it wants. We've heard it so many times, and it essentially means that desire doesn't necessarily make sense. It isn't logical. It can be downright inconvenient, and yet you feel it when you do. Part of the problem, though, is when we tell ourselves that it's love. That's when we just might get ourselves into a sticky situation where we put our heart somewhere where maybe it's not really supposed to go or ready to go. There are times when it just all feels jumbled up, and yet it's such a core human experience that if we didn't take it so seriously, we actually could have some fun with it as well. Well, look, this week we've got some sticky energies at play without a doubt, and it all comes down to Venus. On Monday, August 25th, Venus moves out of the sign of Cancer, where she has found love and comfort in familiarity, and into the sign of Leo, where it is about that spark and that awakening that we tell ourselves is on level of heart. Now, it might be, but just as likely is that it's the lower chakras being activated now. And as soon as Venus enters Leo, we'll very quickly move to connect in harmony with Neptune, with Saturn, with Uranus. All of our dreams, our desires, our hopes, it stirs so strongly, it wakes right up for us. And then on Wednesday, well, that's when Pluto is opposite Venus. And that leads itself to a messy situation that shows us just how complicated what might be happening right now actually is. Now, whether it is that you're open to meeting someone new or not, or you're in an established bond, these energies say that there's a lot of love that can be nourished in hope, in making plans, in having new ideas and new perspectives to bring you closer to another. But what we also have is us getting ahead of ourselves. And before we know it, there is a moment where we have no choice but to be starkly honest about what we're really feeling and what it is within us that finds ourselves move towards a particular person or situation. That's where the real self-knowledge lies, but also it's where we get to define what fate is going to mean for us. It's a turning point that can change a lot of relationships in ways that are consequential going forward from here. Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to your horoscope for the week of August 24, 2025. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. There are just days left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class to take phenomenal astrology classes over at synchronicityuniversity.com. Learn more, sign up now, links below. St. Augustine was an early Christian philosopher, and he wrote about a whole lot of things. In the context of this week, let's talk about it in terms of what he said about love. And what he said was, we think of love as desire, as awakening, as hope and wishes and longing and roses and wine, and us being swept up off our feet as a proof that love is here, that we are loved, that we are experiencing love. But the truth is, what we're calling love is actually eros. Eros is desire, and desire is one of those things where we can sometimes feel like it's unpredictable, where it's almost a force that is outside of us that arrives and we are powerless to it. But according to Augustine, it is desire that can lead us in directions that maybe aren't so good for us, where maybe we know better, and yet we feel ourselves being pulled. So how is it that instead of being pulled by the show, the flash, the high of love, because we know that for every high there is a low, how is it that we can change things? We can rewire ourselves so that instead we think of qualities like loyalty, like fidelity, like intelligence, and find all of that to be just providing us with the kind of rush that we always thought love to be. How is it that we can actually look at those qualities that might otherwise be purported to be boring and find desire there? And according to Augustine, it takes practice. That's really what it comes down to. We have the power to change our immediate responses, but we have to be diligent with how it is we train ourselves in alignment with what it is that we know is right for us. And that's when we start moving beyond just the heart wanting what it wants and thinking of that as something we are powerless over, and instead moving towards what we can define as maybe a whole lot healthier for us, that is actually part of moving our lives in a positive direction. We can become so much like the people that we surround ourselves with, and this becomes especially true in the context of love. But for much of the very beginning of the week, the energy is, well, it's not quite as impulsive, right? We've got Venus first starting the week in the sign of Cancer. And in the sign of Cancer, this is where Venus is that much more interested in the type of love that feels stable and strong. It's the love of family, the love of the history we've shared with another, the love of the familiar. That is what feels like it moves us that much more deeply on a level of heart. But the love of Venus can indicate us falling in love with the performance, with the show, with a sense of grand gestures. And we tell ourselves that that's love, but is it really? I think that's going to be a part of what this week shows a lot of us out there. As soon as Venus changes signs, we'll move to speak in supreme harmony with Saturn and Neptune in trine, and then in harmony with Uranus. And all of that happens just the day after, over the course of Tuesday. And that all is well and good, because this is ultimately Venus stepping into the fray of the larger Star of David, near Star of David configuration that I know I've been talking to you about as of late. However, what we have happening midweek on Wednesday, I think that is going to represent a turning point for a lot of us, whether it's in the context of love or money or wherever it is that we might find desire, whatever desire is for us and whatever it is that we are desiring. Well, either it's going to feel all consuming, or we're going to reach a turning point moment where there's some messy and inconvenient truth we have to face about why we're wanting what we do and whether or not that is the direction to go in. The thing with Pluto shows us what's actually there. It is about turning over the rock and looking at the underbelly and admitting to ourselves where things are not all perfect and in a beautiful bow, but rather where it is that perhaps things have been a lot more complex than we previously acknowledged or even realized. Now, some complexity leads us towards healthy challenges where we learn about ourselves more deeply, but there are other types of complexities that, well, they just feel messy. They feel like the opposite of peace. And a lot of us out there just might be asking ourselves what love is going to be for us and what part of love peace requires and where it is that love and peace go together. Where it is that we don't have that, we're likely going to see it now. But where it is that we do, where we see those seeds there, well, we're that much more willing to put in the time, to put in the effort with hope in our hearts that things can be a whole lot better. Pluto is also symbolic of where we think that things are not fair, where it is we feel that others, whether they are entities or companies or people, maybe aren't being very fair with us, and where it is that we feel certain alliances, partnerships, especially with Venus opposite Pluto, well, where we feel that the other person has a whole lot more power in a way that feels downright uncomfortable to us, and where somebody else might be power tripping, well, we're likely to at least start to see it, acknowledge it, even if it is hard. Because ultimately what Pluto wants is us to be honest with ourselves. It wants what is real and what is true. Pluto is sometimes associated with obsession, compulsion, even addictive qualities as well. And when you think about what is the thing that tends to awaken that more addictive energy, well, very often it can just be that we are chasing a rush, that we are chasing a high. But it can also be with a week like this that where we once had it, we're realizing either we don't anymore or the stakes are getting higher. Where in order to get a sense of fulfilling that rush, that desire, well, we're understanding that much more deeply now that it costs something. And we get to ask ourselves if the cost is worth it. Now, where it is that it leads to healthy self-evaluation, then yeah, it might be. But where it is that it leads to us facing some truth that actually we are behaving in ways, we are thinking in ways that are not the ways in which we are going to find peace, that can be a very difficult realization to have. But Venus isn't only about love and desire. I know that that can feel really dramatic and very pressing for a lot of people this week. But Venus can also have to do with money and pleasure and joy and the things that we pursue that we think are going to bring us levity and infuse our life with beauty. And as much as we get this lovely energy right out of the gate as Venus changes signs, that opposition with Pluto says that occurrences might take place that have us feeling powerless in some way. So it's a good idea to pace ourselves, especially if we're pursuing something that maybe feels consequential. Like if we're looking to indulge or invest in something that is oriented around beauty or art, or something that we think is going to be fun. Well, it's in those types of endeavors in particular that we might want to allow a few days to pass as we get later in the week, because that's when we're going to be able to more honestly evaluate what the true cost actually is. And it's not always what we think. It's not just the cost related to money, but the cost related to our own self-esteem, our self-respect. For some, that might come into play with the contemplation of understanding why we're making the choices that we are as part of figuring out how to make choices that actually align us in a direction that we know is better for us, that we know is ultimately more loving. I know I've been talking to you about the great sextile, the near Star of David energy. I've talked about it just about every video that I've made because it is such a big deal of an energy. It's very strong in the month of August, but it is going to be next year in the month of July that we get these very precise and important moments. We are going to feel the great sextile, that near Star of David energy, that much more strongly. And a big part of what happens next year is going to be as soon as Jupiter changes signs, moving into the sign of Leo and sets up that larger configuration. And it brings that sense of making everything bigger that Jupiter tends to bring to just about any celestial conversation it has. Well, this week, as Venus changes signs, Venus is giving us a little bit of a preview, a little bit of insight. And part of the reason is because of how she's speaking to the big power players I've been telling you about. But there's something else happening this week that I think is important. On Thursday in the Americas or Friday in the rest of the world, Uranus will connect in harmony with Neptune. It was 2 weeks ago that Uranus connected in harmony with Saturn. Saturn and Neptune are so close together in the sky. When something happens to one, it happens to the other, at least right now, as is the case with Uranus. Now, this exact connection with Neptune in particular becomes that much more important because it is going to be part of that Star of David energy we have next year. It is going to be part of the great sextile energy. And it is with a week like this, as we move towards a precise moment, one of the first exact connections of Uranus and Neptune, that we are likely to feel a sense of believing in miracles in an instant, having hope, perhaps even having healing. That is where it is that this energy works to our advantage. But this idea of believing what we want to believe instead of what actually is there, well, it might be that much more heightened, but also it might be that much more karmic as well. What we do know as astrologers is, and as I've been saying, the world we started the 2020s with and the world we end the 2020s with is going to be a very different world. And the major bridge that ushers in that new world is taking place this year and next with the great sextile energy. These near Star of David moments, well, they just make that great sextile energy that much more powerful, that much more expansive. But here's the thing, with easy energy, ultimately it represents a lack of resistance, right? When we have squares, that is typically a conversation of tension. Well, activity is happening. Things are actually taking place. We're asking questions, and we might even be feeling frustrated when there's oppositions, like we're going to have with Venus and Pluto this week. Well, there can be tension with another, and these can play out in our relationships, and it can feel like outside of us arrives a stressor that we really wish wasn't there, that has us facing some difficult truth. But when we look at this larger energy at play, and especially the peak moment this week with Uranus and Neptune, well, this says that the lack of resistance means, well, we're going along for the ride. Whatever might be changing now, whether it's good or not, is besides the point, because ultimately that is a judgment, and that depends on your own values. And whether you think the changes happening are positive or negative, it is about your starting point and your perspective. But for all that, things are changing. They're moving us and ushering us over this bridge that we are on now. And the lack of resistance means that we're not asking the questions, and it means that whatever's changing and us going along with it, well, we might just end up at the place of least resistance, which may not necessarily be the best place for us, especially on a level of what's actually good for us. At least with squares, we're asking ourselves whether or not we like the way that the energy is going and how we can make it better. We're a lot less likely to do that now. And so these are huge planets, Uranus and Neptune. These are outer planets. And so they're karmic. They have a lot to do with what's happening with the collective, even though we are personally feeling these energies as well, especially if they are activating our own chart. Now, if you are a student of astrology, if you have any placements at the very beginning of really any sign, chances are you are feeling this energy that much more personally. But regardless, all of us are under the sky now of this very profound energy. And Uranus, speaking with Neptune, is on the one hand with Uranus, the breakthrough, the change, the sense that things are in the midst of a revolution. Some revolutions are more aggressive, have more resistance than others do. And even what is a revolution or a devolution can be defined differently depending on who you ask. But one thing is for sure, with Uranus, there is change. With Neptune, it might be a change that is presented as so beautiful, so perfect, so ideal, moving us towards greater compassion, a type of world that we're really wanting. But is it really? We may have to be honest with ourselves as to pitfalls that might be taking place here as well. Now, this could orient us towards technology in particular. And so I say that because Uranus has to do with new technologies, and the energy of Gemini connects us to sort of the tech that we interact with each and every day in our smallest moments that sometimes we don't even realize is there. So for example, there was a time when having internet was like a really big deal, right? Like fiber optics, super fast internet. So that would have been Uranus. And very likely because Uranus connects to Aquarius, we get those shades of correspondence there as well. However, with Gemini, it's like what felt like such a revolution at one time, it just becomes so commonplace. So how we might feel about a telephone now, where it's just there, we don't even realize it. That's what we get here, is changes to technologies that we are interacting with so regularly that they're just part of how we go through life and how we move through our days, that they may sometimes even feel invisible. And that is especially true because of the connection with Neptune that we have happening right now. That Neptunian energy makes things seem glamorous, seem ideal, seem compassionate. It can make something presented now that seems really good and like the answer to a prayer, but actually has these insidious layers to it, makes it that much more possible that something like that could be showing up for us to consider how much we want it part of our everyday, regular collective energy as well. I know when we're predicting like world events, some astrologers like to talk about war and predicting the start of wars, the ending of wars, and things like that. And I understand if that's what their practice calls them to do. But the thing is that even though more people than ever before in human history live in peace and prosperity, I don't think that there has been a single time in human history, at least documented human history, where there wasn't some type of war taking place somewhere. We can be very self-centered, right? That is a lot of what astrology is about as well, because ultimately we interpret the symbols based on how we are perceiving them. Because with astrology, and Western astrology in particular, we are the center of the universe. And as the center of the universe, it is our perception that truly matters. And from our perception, that can have its biases. And where one person thinks that this type of conflict would be awful, somebody else might be actually pursuing it for their own reasons. Where it is that we tell ourselves things are so peaceful, somebody else looking at the same sky might right now be in the midst of conflict and in the midst of war and is having a very different experience of this energy. So it's important to keep that in mind. And I think that ultimately does come down to having some humility as it is that we look at the sky and interpret the symbols. Consider the added layer as well. It was late last week that we had a new moon at 0 degrees of Virgo. I spoke about it at length in last week's video. But as we're entering this week, in the first days of this week, we are still feeling its energies, and chances are it feels like it reaches us that much more. And that is because right out of the gate, it is going to be the sun, newly in the sign of Virgo, that is going to speak in a conversation of tension with Uranus and also set up that larger YOD configuration with Pluto, Neptune, and Saturn. This is essentially the sun awakening these conversations further that the new moon was having late last week. And this means that in some ways it might feel as if we are dragging forward the energy of late last week into this week. Now, although I'm a person who believes that there aren't enough surprises in life, I do believe that. I do love a good surprise. Sometimes the surprise is more just about how we feel. Maybe we feel really frustrated, and that shock and discontent quality of the new moon might really feel like it shows itself to us in the first days of this week when we get the sun square Uranus. But just like with the new moon in that YOD, the YOD points the way to where it is we just might find resolution very quickly, and we just might elevate the energy in a way that helps us to make the most of it that much more. And we elevate the energy by going to the sun in this case, whereas last week it was by going to the moon. And the sun being in the sign of Virgo is about looking at what actually is. I've said it before, this is the proof is in the pudding sign. That's what Virgo is about. It's about acknowledging the reality of the situation, looking at the details, and understanding that that shows you what's real. And it isn't always our fears or what it is that our hopes may be that necessarily are reality. Sometimes it really is that in order to be honest with ourselves, we have to look at the evidence. And I think that's going to be part of what just might be surprising now, but also might point the way to how we can make things better. Now, some interpretations of the YOD, especially if you find it in your birth chart, is that where that arrow is pointing towards, that planet holds some key towards you uncovering and understanding your life purpose, your karmic direction in this lifetime. It helps to bring to consciousness just what that purpose might be that much more readily, and in moments that feel like they come out of nowhere. But again, in meeting the moment, we find resolution very quickly and we're redefined in some way. But this is energy that's happening for the collective. And for the collective, the power now, the arrow now is pointing towards the sun. And the sun is a symbol of rationality and prophecy as well. It is a symbol of bringing light. That's why enlightenment is a part of solar energy. And it is also the sun that is about understanding the truth of ourselves at our very core. More personally, what makes us shine that much brighter. And where it is perhaps that we haven't allowed ourselves to contemplate that question more deeply, it could be at the start of this week that in a quick moment that might feel like it leads us first towards discomfort. Well, ultimately, it's going to help us to uncover what it is that the karmic purpose of this moment in our lives just might be, and where it is that this moment gets us in touch with that core, that center. Well, in an instant, we just might find ourselves feeling a whole lot more lighter. That is also part of the sun, where it is that very quickly we can put some baggage down. We don't have to carry it anymore, and we're liberated from it because we're seeing how so much of that baggage was conceptions and emotions and not necessarily related to the actuality of a given situation. Well, it can then free us to just be more us, to be able to listen to what it is that we're really wanting in our heart of hearts, and it guides and lights up the pathway towards it that much more readily. Whatever is happening in our lives at the very beginning of this week might in some way hearken to or help us to see differently what was taking place in our lives right around the middle of July, because that was where Mercury was when he stood still and went retro. And that is where Mercury is now returning to and moving forward from. Once we're on brand new territory, we don't have to revisit old ground necessarily. And while it tends to be the case that one planet is retrograde or more at any given moment, with Mercury, we feel it that much more readily because it has to do with our daily lives and our thought processes and more. And so having Mercury now leave shadow, it helps us to see that much more clearly where we're going and make a plan and feel as if we're able to realize it that much more. Mercury is the ruling planet of Virgo, and it is leaving shadow in the sign of Leo. And it is the sun that is the ruling luminary of Leo, which is in the sign of Virgo now. They're basically hosting each other's ruling planets. And when this occurs, it's what astrologers call mutual reception. And so these energies end up being connected, whether or not the planets are actually and actively speaking with precision. The larger journey at play while the mutual reception is taking place means that both signs are interconnected and both planets are receptive to each other at this time. They inform each other. They help each other in ways that aren't always readily apparent, but certainly are there. And so I do think right out of the gate with the sun, having this surprise moment, maybe frustrating, maybe breakthrough that ultimately aligns us with an understanding of the purpose of this moment, will likely give way to a sense of us being on a brand new pathway, of having dealt with what we needed to, and now feeling truly like we can plan for our future and we can move forward. What I love about this week for us, there's so much here. It is a powerful and meaningful astrological moment. Well, I'm going to say the fact that Mercury ends shadow. That is a big deal, although it can sometimes be subtle, because it isn't necessarily that it feels like Mercury is going out, making some huge alignment, but it is in mutual reception with the sun. And because of that, What is happening with the sun will absolutely be part of this sense of Mercury leaving shadow as well, which means that the frustrations, the breakthroughs will in some way also connect us to seeing things, speaking of things, understanding things differently in some way, perhaps a very much needed way that we hadn't appreciated before. For all that, though, it becomes a very powerful time to trust that much more readily the occurrences happening around us and what it is that we want. I tend to find when Mercury is retrograde, there are things I want, there might be things I buy or outside of that as well. And once Mercury goes direct, it just really looks very different, sometimes very quickly. And that's the kind of energy we have here, where it isn't just about seeing it differently, though again, we might see July 17 and what happened around there differently in some way at the beginning of this week. But it's about seeing things in new ways, having new perspectives and new experiences as well that help us to move forward, make new plans, and find new inspirations. Well, thank you so much for watching. What do you love about this week? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading you guys, and to prove it to you, here's some of my most recent favorite comments. Thank you to everyone who likes, who comments, who subscribes, who shares, who thumbs up. All of it means so much. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. And of course, if you want to know how all this wonderful stuff this week speaks to you in your sign, log on to NadiyaShahSuperstars.com, where you get expanded exclusive video scopes each and every week for as low as just $3 a month, with choose your membership rate. Higher tiers get you things like all access passes to Synchronicity University events, consultations with me, and so much more. All of this in the Superstar space at NadiyaShahSuperstars.com. Links are in the description below. On Tuesday, whether live or online, it is Andy and I who are going to be doing a live event, which is super exciting. And it's all about the great sextile energy that I spoke of this week, that I've spoken with you about before. The difference here is that with this event, we will be talking about, well, it's Andy who's going to take Saturn and Neptune in Aries and what that means in his own like wise ass way of presenting it. For me, I'm going to focus a lot more on Chiron and Taurus and helping us to understand how that just might be a saving grace of an energy. So I've spoken a lot about the near star of David, but I haven't spoken yet really publicly. I've touched on it in certain specific events, but this really will be the first time that as part of what I do here online with Synchronicity University, with my own work, that I will be presenting some ideas that I have, considering that a big part of this second part of the decade is also going to be defined by the fact that Chiron moving into the sign of Taurus starting next year is going to square Pluto. So I'll have a lot more to say about that in my presentation, but you can learn a lot more about this. Join us online. Join us in person. We've got a few spots left and you'd be very welcome to join us. You can head over to my website, NadiyaShah.com/Toronto, because yes, the event is happening in downtown Toronto, Andy and I. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've got the swag bags going. I'm super excited to gift you guys stuff and just to hug you and meet you and sign books for you and so much more. So whether you join us online, whether you join us in person, you'd be very welcome. And you'll be presented with new information that I haven't been yet talking about very widely, but I'm super excited to share with you in this environment for the very first time. Synchronicity University has some absolutely incredible programs coming up next week. They start next week as we enter September. That's when new programs are going to begin. And you've got just a few days left as this week begins to choose your tuition rate as low as just $5 a class, an unheard of rate to learn from this caliber of astrologer, numerologist as well, and so much more. So I'm going to start with my own class, and this is Past Lives in Astrology Part 2. I loved exploring past lives with you guys at Synchronicity University recently, a couple of months back. And so this is going to build on that class as well. And it is this class that's going to help us to further examine and interpret from a lens of uncovering past lives for ourselves as we interpret the chart. We'll be looking at the 8th house. We'll be looking at more in the 12th about Neptune and so much more. So I hope that you will join us. And you've got a few days left to choose your tuition rate and to join me online only at synchronicityuniversity.com. Past lives in astrology. It's coming up this September. Learn more, sign up now, links below. Synchronicity University is proud to present Sarah El Harar, the one and only Astro Auntie. She is amazing. Now, I did record an interview with her. I don't think it's up just yet, but this interview, I will tell you, something happened to the visual, so don't worry about that. I'll do something else with her so that you guys get to see her online, very likely on Instagram Live in the coming days. But the audio is really amazing. We had such an amazing conversation talking about aspects and how to understand aspects. Well, this really was just a taste because Sarah, the Astro Auntie, is going to be diving into aspects over the course of a 5-week journey. Nothing less than a 5-week journey just on aspects. And this really is about helping you to integrate energies that much more readily, and it will take your practice to the next level. Sarah at Synchronicity University, you've got just literally days left to choose your tuition rate. And so this is the time to sign up for this class. And Sarah is absolutely brilliant. I think a lot of students out there are going to get so much from this class. So learn more, sign up now at synchronicityuniversity.com, links below. Synchronicity University is proud to present the September 2025 speaker series coming up starting next week. This is super exciting, and we've got all these incredible astrologers who are going to be joining us. I'm going to start with Hannah Turajura. Now, Hannah, I love. She's amazing. I loved talking to her. That interview is up on my channel. I've been sharing clips on Instagram and on TikTok as well. You can find those links below. But for all that, Hannah spoke to me about Juno and about Athena. So she's coming to Synchronicity University to talk about Juno. And that is a course that really helps you to interpret this asteroid that much more fully in your own chart. And it is going to be as part of an upcoming program at the Omega Institute, which is going to be the first weekend of October. It's right around the corner. This really is the time to sign up for that course if you would like to join us. If you're in the tri-state area or you want to come out to the tri-state New York City area, you'd be very welcome to join us. I would love to meet you there. And there it is that Hannah is going to be teaching about Pallas Athena. So I'll talk more about that event a little bit later. But let me just say, she's brilliant. I loved talking to her. She's going to be at that event. I'm going to be at that event in October. And I think that there's so much positive energy to be created, that much more together. And the asteroids, wow, they really get us in touch with this other layer of understanding. And I'm going to tell you a secret in that interview that I did with her. Alejandro Ruiz, I had the pleasure of speaking with him. That interview will publish in the next couple of days. And he is going to be teaching on techniques that are rooted in understanding the soul from the medieval Islamic tradition. And he is just so brilliant. He had so much to share. He is very clearly a rising star in astrology without a doubt. And he has so much knowledge and insight into this tradition and how it helps us to understand nothing less than the composition of the soul and more. Patricia Bell is going to be talking about When the Heart Speaks, connecting it to astrology, but she is the author of Timeless Love. This is a beautiful book, and it's about grief, and it incorporates some of her knowing as a medium and so much more. So she's going to be bringing that loving perspective, but also incorporating an understanding of certain astrological symbols that are playing out in everyone's chart, in your chart, and what that means and how it is that that might be awakening you on a heart level. She's the perfect person to teach this. Humera Hyder is going to teach on numerology magic, and Humera is my aunt. That's true. She's my aunt, so I'm super, super excited that she's coming to the school as well. And so she's like super practical, like she is old school with her numerology. And what I mean by that is she's so much about, okay, these are what your numbers are, but you're lacking certain numbers. How do you get those numbers? What stones do you need? What herbs do you need? And more. And she will help you to understand the different numbers at play. And so it's a beginner-friendly class, but it'll give you a good grasp of some of the basic numbers and how you can start to use them to your advantage, because that's really what she's all about. You'll learn so much in a short amount of time and come away with a really practical understanding that you can implement right away. And Shu Yap is going to teach on Fidaria technique, and I'm super excited about this as well. This is a specific technique that is so powerful where it comes to prediction. And she is somebody who has impressed me with her astrology before. And so I'm so glad that she's coming to the school. And this is a technique you'll be able to use right away to honor that part of our tradition, which has to do with prediction. So you can see here we have incredible astrologers coming up with this speaker series. You can learn a lot more and sign up now. You've got a few days left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class. Links below. And consultations are now available with me and Andy of Wise Ass Astrology over on my website, nadiyashah.com/consultations. You will find that link below. And when you go to that link, you'll be able to choose who you want your consultation with. You'll be able to then go to our actual schedule, decide on the exact time that you want based on our calendar. From there, you are then sent to a form that you're going to fill out with everything you want us to know before the consultation begins. And then once you make your payment, you will automatically be sent a Zoom link. And when you get that Zoom link, that is going to be your time. And that is when I'm going to show up. And it will be wonderful, I'm sure. And I say that because, gosh, I thank you so much for your trust, for your love, the incredible people who've trusted me as I've stepped back into doing client work again. And really, it's you that takes the lead. You tell me what you want me to look at. I'm super happy to look at that. Some people are more chatty. Some people like the back and forth. Other people, though, they just like to listen. Sometimes I can really just go off, and I'll just make sure that your questions are answered when you get a consultation as well. So I hope that you will join me. And also, Andy is available as well. You can book Andy there, all on my website. Those links are below. And thank you. Thank you so much for this moment with you. Thank you for your trust. I'm so grateful for it. So yeah, last week I sang and a lot of you really liked that I sang, and I love you so much. Thank you so much for that. I wish I could sing every week, and I guess technically I could if I wanted to sing every week, but I got to go with the energy and where it takes me as well. But yeah, right now, I'll tell you, right now, the space I'm in, it is so warm. It is like super warm. I've got the fan going. I can see myself, feel myself sweating. I've tied my hair back. You know, I barely do that. And so I wasn't really feeling like singing. I was like, no, I want to wear a loose t-shirt and I'm going to talk. And I so wanted to talk about this week, the stuff that I opened with, and especially with Augustine. I just felt like his spirit being so close and really wanting to come through in this video. So I did that as well. I guess I could have sang as well, right? Let me sit with it. Let me see what kind of songs I might present to you guys in the future, but at least I know I can. And I had so much fun with that. I mean, I was back after being sick and I just was filled with energy. And so it was so much fun, and I'm so glad that it was meaningful to so many people out there. So thank you for that. And once again, this week, it's going to be me and Andy doing a live event. Whether you join us online or in person, you would be so welcome. So I send you very big hugs, lots and lots of gratitude. And yes, just thank you. Thank you again for this moment with you. So stay tuned now for short horoscopes coming up. And until we connect again, take care. But more importantly, what do I always like to say? I always like to end my videos by saying, it'll be a great week. Enjoy. The heart wants what it wants. We've heard it so many times, and it essentially means that desire doesn't necessarily make sense. It isn't logical. It can be downright inconvenient, and yet you feel it when you do. Part of the problem, though, is when we tell ourselves that it's love. That's when we just might get ourselves into a sticky situation where we put our heart somewhere where maybe it's not really supposed to go or ready to go. There are times when it just all feels jumbled up, and yet it's such a core human experience that if we didn't take it so seriously, we actually could have some fun with it as well. Well, look, this week we've got some sticky energies at play without a doubt, and it all comes down to Venus. On Monday, August 25th, Venus moves out of the sign of Cancer, where she has found love and comfort in familiarity, and into the sign of Leo, where it is about that spark and that awakening that we tell ourselves is on level of heart. Now, it might be, but just as likely is that it's the lower chakras being activated now. And as soon as Venus enters Leo, we'll very quickly move to connect in harmony with Neptune, with Saturn, with Uranus, all of our dreams, our desires, our hopes. It stirs so strongly, it wakes right up for us. And then on Wednesday, well, that's when Pluto is opposite Venus. And that leads itself to a messy situation that shows us just how complicated what might be happening right now actually is. Now, whether it is that you're open to meeting someone new or not, or you're in an established bond, these energies say that there's a lot of love that can be nourished in hope, in making plans, in having new ideas and new perspectives to bring you closer to another. But what we also have is us getting ahead of ourselves. And before we know it, there is a moment where we have no choice but to be starkly honest about what we're really feeling and what it is within us that finds ourselves moved towards a particular person or situation. That's where the real self-knowledge lies, but also it's where we get to define what fate is going to mean for us. It's a turning point that can change a lot of relationships in ways that are consequential going forward from here. Now, how Venus changes signs, speaks to you and your sign, depends on your sun, moon, and rising signs. Take all three into consideration, synthesize the information to make it unique to you, and there are lots more horoscopes available over on my YouTube channel, Nadiya_Shah, or in the superstar space at thefutureismagical.com. Aries, flirtation, romance, what the heart is truly wanting. It just feels so on the surface, and where right out of the gate it might feel like you find it, you're connecting with it that much more, and there might be a flirtation that holds so much promise, but a lot of that promise really is your own imagination. You are likely going to have a moment that is a lot more honest about whom you want, whom you're attracted to, why you flirted the way that you did, and what it's going to mean going forward from here. Taurus, love and the past become intimately tied at this time, and it feels very consequential with a week like this. In the early days of the week, we get harmonious energies which say you might be nostalgic or thinking of the past very lovingly, very ideally. But then as we get to the middle of the week and that Plutonian energy kicks in, well, that's when you likely are going to be looking at some matters of the past that might have been hurtful or felt unfair to you in some way. Now, it's all part of your journey towards greater love than you've known before. Sometimes you just have to feel it so that you can let it go. Venus is your ruling planet. You are going to feel this energy more than most. And so acknowledge what has been, where you are now, knowing that that is the way to empower yourself to move towards the love you desire. Gemini, look, outside of love, Venus is also just joy, easier relationships, and this is about those siblings, cousins, neighbors in your life, feeling that much more amiable and open to you. But of course, you do want to be careful with this, especially if these are people that you don't know very well. It may seem very lovely in the first days of the week, and then by the time we get to the middle of the week, well, one of these people, they just might be all about the drama. There's like a lot of drama happening there. And some of it might feel like not a surprise, but yeah, you might get some of that. But for all of that, also know that these energies can play out in other ways where you might have had a conversation with somebody or just sort of been relaxed about it, having fun about it. And then in the middle of the week, there's this very strong reaction, whether you feel your buttons are pushed or theirs. It's something that may come up for consideration. Words are powerful. Use them wisely. Cancer, money you earn, money you spend, self-love, self-esteem. So yeah, financial matters, you might have to pay attention to them. That is a possibility here. Whether it's just being wise with how it is that you go about acquiring, spending, what you think is worth spending money on, what isn't worth spending money on. This is all part of the consideration of this time. But for all that, what we also get, well, in the context of love, love and self-love are intimately tied for you now. And you're about to have a real moment of insight and moment of truth about what that is for you and where you stand with that, especially around the middle of the week. Whereas in the first days of the week, you might think everything is glorious and stable. As we get to the middle of the week, there just might be a moment, a reflection, an understanding that helps you to be that much more deeply honest with yourself, whether it's a past situation or a current one, where it is that you stepped up in terms of self-love, how that changes things, that ultimately can be a really good thing. Leo, identity, who you know yourself to be, what matters to you most and first. And so look, Venus moving into your sign, you become a magnet. That's the great thing. As soon as Venus enters your sign, chances are you'll feel different. Your heart expands. You're feeling that much more as if it's easy to attract what you want, whether that's love or money or just kindness from others as well. However, we get to that middle of the week point with Venus opposite Pluto, and that can be a moment that's very dramatic. That can be a moment that feels even fraught with a lot of energy, a lot of emotion, and a lot of uncertainty as well. So stay open to possibility, whether it's about a past or present situation. You're about to see things differently in some way from a level of heart, and there might be some feelings of unfairness there. Again, it could be a current or a past, or you coming across, or someone from the past popping up. Like, these are the types of scenarios that can happen. They feel fated. They feel like you didn't have a choice, that it came up out of nowhere. But as it shows up, well, this becomes one of these very powerful windows that shows you something about where you are in terms of your heart and what it is that you're really wanting. And that in turn allows you to put you on a path that's going to help you to get it that much more readily. Virgo, soul, psyche, spirit. That is where we have Venus moving into, which means in many ways love becomes quiet. It goes behind the scenes. Now, sometimes it is that it feels like somebody maybe you had your eye on, maybe you were dating, or someone you're in a relationship with, you're just not able to be present with each other that much. But outside of that, it really could feel as if what's happening between you and another person, like you can't announce it to the world, you can't tell other people. And yet, here's the thing. We get to the first days of the week. Everything's sweet and lovely. There's a lot of hope, which is a beautiful thing. But midweek, there is a moment where a lot is going to be stirring within you on those levels of soul, psyche, spirit. And this might have to do with putting some hurt of the past behind you, where you thought somebody else was really not fair or worse to you as well. That hurt may come up as part of releasing it and letting it go. For all that, though, this can also be positively cleansing because it opens your heart on the other side, where you acknowledge some disappointment, but also prepare yourself for loving that much more fully in the period ahead. This is a time of preparation, no less, because it is going to be next month that Venus is going to enter your sign, and you are about to start a brand new chapter in the context of love. Libra, friendships, group dynamics, sometimes they can be very supportive of what you're wanting in your heart and expanding your heart and options and love and more and joy and more. But sometimes they can actually complicate things. And you're walking that fine line with a week like this, especially as Venus changes signs in those first days right out of the gate. Yes, we have energy that's stabilizing, that's hopeful, that's supportive. And then we get that complicated energy of Venus opposite your ruling planet, Venus. So whatever is happening with a friend, through a friend, chances are it is that much more relevant to you. And it could feel as if one of these people is really not being very fair to you at this time. So pace yourself and be yourself. You know, I like to say that. But know that if there have been any lingering resentments or hurts, they're going to stir now as part of you acknowledging them and figuring out what it is you might want to do next, whether that's in love and how it interferes with friendship or intersects with friendship, or how it is that you are understanding your relationship with a platonic friend. Scorpio, love and respect are intimately tied for you now. And, you know, this is a part of the sky that says go big or go home. And you know how to do that. And so that's all good. But it is Venus here that at first, in the first days of this week, as part of this journey, is about you feeling hopeful, you looking onward and upward. But then we get Venus on Wednesday opposite Pluto. And that is energy that is rather triggering, that is rather intense. And where it is that you felt you were not respected in the past or disrespected, you are going to face that and feel it all as we get to the middle of this week. For all that though, it is also this energy that speaks to you getting a lot more clear within yourself about what you're really going for in a higher sense, where you had it before, where you didn't, and now you're evaluating it all very differently as part of reconfiguring a pathway onward and upward. Now, if you're in a relationship, this can be a powerful time of shared goals, and where the two of you have not been on the same page, at least now you're able to address it. Sagittarius, Venus here is all about the international love and feeling really optimistic and hopeful in the context of love, whether it's love you have or love that you want. The first days of this week, as soon as this transit begins, can be really lovely. It can feel that much more hopeful and stabilizing. And it is about having a more philosophical approach to love that feels like it pays off. However, there is that challenging moment right in the middle of the week with Venus opposite Pluto, and that can bring with it a real sense of a standoff of some kind. And so you believing something very different than this person does politically, spiritually, religiously, philosophically can be part of the tension and part of your own feelings of how complicated things can be. And these might be questions that need to be asked now as part of figuring out what it is you might want to do next. In established bonds, it becomes so much about taking on new adventures and where that fits in and what you are hoping for in a more lofty sense and what they are, whether or not it's on the same page. That is part of what you might be addressing at this time. Capricorn, profound change, truth, transformation, regeneration, love can really point the way at a time like this. Now, do know that money and love do not mix. It might seem like that at first, and yet, as we get to the middle of the week and Pluto kicks in, that's when things can get really messy where you're trying to bridge the two. And that messiness just might be your own feelings, or it might be a practical situation. But for all of that, this is a time of helping you to understand more fully what your truth is in the context of love. Where you have it, yes, there might be a challenging moment, but ultimately the relationship will be made that much stronger. But where you don't have that, well, you're willing to be honest with yourself, and part of wanting to move towards something that feels a lot more authentic could have you making, or at least contemplating, important change. Aquarius, this is Venus moving into your opposite sign, which tends to be really good for long-term relationships, whether you're meeting someone with long-term potential or whether it is that you're in an established bond. As a general principle, Venus does bring sweetness and light into the mix. And while the first days of this week do have that, by the time we get to Wednesday and that opposition of Venus and Pluto kicks in, that's when things can feel really messy. Now, sometimes this represents a feeling of a powerful pull towards another person. Sometimes it is that things feel complicated or maybe even unfair with where you are with another. But remember, as I've told you before, and I know I'll tell you many times as part of this larger 20-year journey of Pluto in your sign, Pluto is in your sign. And when it comes to planets opposite that Pluto, it is Pluto that is the dominant energy. And in many ways, you have more power than you realize. But as soon as you're able to appreciate it, well, you find yourself feeling that much stronger, no matter what might be happening or not happening with another. Pisces, clients, customers, coworkers, immediate supervisors, if there are any romantic possibilities, overtures, or a little bit of flirty energy there, boy, it might be at the start of the week that it seems really lovely and promising, and then things can feel very complicated in the middle of the week. So just pace yourself and be yourself. You know, I like to say that, but especially with people that you work with in any capacity. This part of the sky also has to do with those places you frequent every day. That's where possibilities in love and these lessons in love feel that much more likely. And yet, for all that, you will be encouraged to prioritize the places that are genuinely heart-centered for you, that are fun for you, and to feel that much more dedicated to them. Well, thank you again for watching. It'll be a great transit. Enjoy.